Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Justin Dor toku ingoa, he po tātaki ahau ki te kaipara moana remediation o reira. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's KMR webinar. We're doing a lot more of those webinars, and that's because we've got a lot of interest in our program. We've also made some recent changes, which are pretty exciting. So today's webinar is around moving into the hillside. Many of you will know that for much of the first 2 years we've been going, we've focused a lot on our waterways, which remain really important, but getting into the hill country and to cover the whole landscape is pretty important, and particularly when we've had such terrible weather, floods, cyclones and things in the last 12 months. So for me, it's really exciting to be able to share our progress and to korero with you today. So first of all, just a brief intro for those not familiar with KMR. KMR works to protect and restore the kaipara moana, the kaipara harbour. And as you can see from the slide, it's a pretty big harbour. In fact, actually, it's the largest natural harbour in the Southern Hemisphere and one of the largest in the world. So this harbour is very special and it's of international and global significance. The harbour itself is not just the thing of interest. The catchment is too. Obviously very, very large in terms of scale. It's 600,000 hectares or 6,000 square kilometres. Key things to note, a quarter of the catchment is in the Auckland region, 3/4, the rest is in Northland region, and we work across both of those regions in KMR and work really closely with both councils. There are 7 major river systems in the catchment, but you can see that the catchment almost goes east coast to west, north to south. It's a pretty large catchment there. And there's 9 planting eco-districts across that catchment, which is important because KMR eco-sources, of course, our native plants. So how are we going 2 years into full operational delivery? Those stats speak for themselves, so I won't dwell on them, but I'm really proud of the team having done a lot of training and skills right across the catchment, and training and monitoring and developing our folk, supporting them is really quite a key part of KMR as a Jobs for Nature program. We've got a lot of local suppliers, businesses and nurseries who work with us as accredited providers. They're often very central to landowners, supporting landowners in the work they're doing. A lot of new work has been generated by us in the catchment, and again you can see we've invested around 13.3 million to date in either completed projects or contracted projects, which is a lot of local money into particularly rural communities. We do a lot of engagement with people. Sometimes it's a little invisible because of the scale of that catchment, but we're now, working with close to half of the landowners in this catchment, rural pastoral landowners in particular. We've developed 547, so nearly 550 co-funded plans. I want to shout out to our delivery partners, Fonterra, who also work with us quite closely around Tiaki plans in this respect. And we've got a lot more plans with landowners in development. So our pipeline of landowners is really small, is very strong. We've got a lot of engagement going on in the community level. Willie Wright, our mana whenua relations lead, Ben Hope, Griffin Hope, many of our staff do a lot of work getting out there and getting our message across. And what's really exciting is that I think this shift to moving into the hill country, will really help us offer support to landowners who really want to get into that hill country. In terms of how we're going in terms of environmental outcomes, activities on the ground, again, these are really amazing results, just all credit to everyone involved. 1.36 million trees either in the ground or contracted to go in the ground pretty shortly, and that figure is growing, really significantly now, month on month. These are December 2023 figures that you're seeing. I won't go through the stats there, but that's a lot of fencing as well. We are seeing, obviously, people fence first and plant later, and we'll see more of that, but really, really pleased with progress there. Well done to the landowners. Sediment reduction really is our key focus in KMR, and this photo that you can see here is post-cyclone Gabrielle in the Kaipara Hills in the Auckland region. Gives you an indication of what we're trying to stop, halve the sediment flows coming off this land when it rains heavily into the Kaipara Moana. So I'd like to introduce now Steph Versteeg, our Strategic Business Manager, who's going to take it from here. Kia ora, Steph.
Kia ora. I'll start again. I can't believe I just didn't unmute myself, but there we go. Kia ora tātou. My name's Steph Versteeg, as Justine mentioned. I'm part of the KMR team. We've also got a couple of others in the digital room here today from KMR. Some technical folk. We've got Duncan Curvell, a land management expert, and Dave McDermott, who leads KMR's work with nurseries. So hold on to your questions. This will be just a short overview of what we're doing, and there'll be plenty of time for questions or discussions or comments at the end. Yeah, as Justine mentioned, sediment reduction is a key focus for KMR, and research has estimated that the annual load of sediment to the Kaipara Moana, the harbour, is more than 7 times above pre-human rates. And so investing in projects and people to reduce erosion and soil loss is KMR's core focus. And we're ultimately, as Justine mentioned, aiming to reduce or even halve the flow of sediment from our land into waterways in the harbour. So this image here, taken from the Kaipara Hills, shows that across the catchment that there are really diverse types of erosion, but also real opportunities to slow the loss of soil and sedimentation of our waterways. You can see in this image not just different erosion types, but also features in the landscape that are already providing protective value. Soil conservation isn't a new thing. And there's no one single way of reducing erosion and soil loss. And this is a photoshopped image that the team's done, and it's just one view of what a more resilient landscape could look like, highlighting some of the many actions that people can take on farm. So these actions can deliver wider benefits as well, beyond erosion control, to increase our landscape's resilience to extreme weather, help diversify incomes through timber or carbon or honey, and help protect important farm infrastructure or enhancing habitat value and restoring mahinga kai. And we're working with hundreds of people, as Justine mentioned, across the catchment to co-fund projects to reduce erosion and sedimentation in ways that support landowners' visions for their land too. So we co-fund projects along waterways. You can see some examples in the landscape already here. We co-fund projects along waterways, streams, rivers, wetlands, and adjacent to the coast to exclude stock and to establish native plants, to stabilise banks, slow overland flows. We've also, as Justine mentioned, extended the support that we can provide into erodible hill country, with the first hill country planting projects happening last winter. In erodible hill country, we can now co-fund projects to exclude stock and plant areas or manage the natural regeneration of native species. We can also support with fencing native forests where stock isn't already excluded, and help with support with silver pasture. That's the space planting of trees and grazed areas. So we can support poplar planting this winter, and hoping also to support some trials of space planted native species. We're also now running occasional calls for other types of projects, such as alternative non-pine afforestation, and potentially in the future also constructed features such as sediment traps or detention bunds. So your hill country land can be eligible for funding if it has high erosion risk and has connectivity to waterways or the coast. These are the criteria that we use. But you can get in touch with us, and our staff and our field advisors can chat with you about your land and your aspirations. We can jump online and look at some aerial imagery and some data sets, or we can and/or we can also have a field advisor come out and walk the land with you to help you figure out what your options are. So this is just a summary of the projects that we can support. You can reach out to us for more information or make an expression of interest at any time, and someone will follow up with a phone call and have a chat with you about what the best next steps are. Of note here, if you want to plant this winter, then there's a bit of a lead in, so we encourage you to get in touch to make an expression of interest as soon as possible. The alternative non-pine exotic afforestation option, we do only run occasional expressions of interest for these projects. So if you're interested in this in the future, make sure you're on our email list. Maybe everyone here is already on that list. It's how you heard of this pānui, how you heard of this webinar. But we do send out a pānui, and that will let you know if there are calls for expressions of interest around various types of projects in the future, such as these alternative non-pine, alternative afforestation with alternative species. And with any space planting options, if you're interested in planting poplars, the nursery that's the primary source of that material would need any expressions of interest to be made by the 31st of March. So that's a bit of a hard cut off there. But otherwise, we're open for conversations at any point and encourage expressions of interest.
Great, thanks, Steph and Justine. That's sort of the high level approach to our move into hillsides. And now I guess there's a chance for any questions. You can either pop them in the chat, Q&A, raise your hand if you've got one as well, and we'll hopefully be able to answer them. If they get a bit too technical or a bit long, we'll grab your details and be in touch so we can talk specifics. But if anyone's got any specific questions, would like to add anything in, feel free to raise your hand or jump in.
Question on poplar?
Price checking.
Yeah, Burke has a question there. Are poplar species decided?
Dave might want to answer that one. Or Duncan.
Kia ora, Bert.
I can have a go at that.
Oh, yeah, go on, Dunk.
Oh, sorry, Dave. It depends on what's available in the nursery, and they'll be getting audited currently this week. The main species we have is kawa, we have crow's nest, and we have otamua in poplar pole form, and a similar suite of species in the wands. Majority of the poles will be kawa variety. So these are varieties that vary depending on their exposure, their how they deal with, wet-footedness, and other features. So when we come to see your site and when we come to make a
Price checking.
prescription for this tree species, we'll try to align what we've got available to the
Hi, Mick.
conditions on the site that you're trying to remediate. Hopefully that's the answer you're after.
Hi, I can't get my chat to work, so I'm talking. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Stephen. What was your question?
Stephen here. Yeah, what's the best way to go about submitting an expression of interest, please? What's the best contact method?
Yeah, the easiest way to do that would be to jump on our website, and there's a link on there that will just take you through to a little form where you just pop in a couple of key details, press submit, and then someone will give you a call and follow up within a few days.
Thanks.
Ben, there's some more questions in the chat there. Do you want to take those?
I'll put a link to the expressions of interest in the chat as well for those who are interested, and it'll come out in the email that you get sent at the end of this. Wayne, there's a question. Oh, sorry, we'll work through. Chris Phillips, Duncan mentioned wands. So you're using other popular versions such as wands and stakes, i.e. lesser quality planting material. Duncan?
You need to pause. Right.
Right.
Chris, thank you for your question. Yeah, we're using wands, which are small material, probably half a meter, smaller material that has, we've been doing trials in our Northland Regional Council, have been doing trials with smaller material and how they're responding in our clay soil. So there's a series of trials going ahead, and we're going to do it in a small, controlled way, using this smaller material this year. We're not going to use stakes this year because we haven't got a price and we don't know availability of it. So this year it's just poles. That's your normal 3 meter pole, and wands, which is your smaller 1 meter material. So that's what we're going for this year. Thank you. And then there was also a question about Veronese. Once the audit's complete, Wayne will get back to you on availability of that variety. I don't know at the moment. I do know it's available. Just don't know how much is available. Kia ora, thank you.
Louise's question kind of touches on that as well, as saying pole supply is pretty tight around the country. Do we have good supply for this coming winter? Is that what the process you're undertaking at the moment of your audit, Duncan?
I can see there's a question here about should nurseries pivot to poles and wands away from native re-veg species. Dave, would you want to?
Sure thing. I think that I think that most nurseries would carry on with their native plant production, given that at this point in time, the vast majority of our planting is still local native species. I know that there's some interest from nurseries around how to diversify into some of these alternative species and into poplars. As Dunk pointed out, there's a lot of information that's coming through from NRC and from the trials that they've been doing. We're waiting with bated breath around what the outcome of those are. We're also seeing some interest in exotic species, things like eucalyptus. So it's going to be a case of adapting as the market changes and as the demand goes up. But I certainly wouldn't be pushing any native nurseries to go jumping into a lot of exotics as a immediate reaction. I think it's more like a wait and see and easing into it. So we'll have our eyes and ears over this, and my role as nursery liaison will be to make sure our nurseries are around all that information and they understand what's coming down the pipeline.
Yes, may I add to that too? We are seeing a lot of landowners really preferring native species as well, just generally around their choices on farm or on land. And, we honour landowner choice there too. So I think, we'll always see KMR offering natives as well as non-native, the non-wilding, non-pine exotic species. My sense is that both will be needed into the future.
Great. There's a couple of questions from the Q&A. What's sediment traps? Who'd like to describe an example of a sediment trap? Steph, is that your wheelhouse? Looks like Duncan.
A sediment trap is generally a small-scale intervention on a part of often a farm infrastructure or an area of overland flow where it's known that sediment flows and can be caught and cleared out in an easy maintained way. So a sediment trap can often be a sump beside a race where there's a large amount of sediment coming off that part of the farm and can be cleared out. Not to be confused with bunds, which is a sort of a more extensive high flow type of sediment capture device. So sediment trap, small, targeted, strategic. Bunds, more sort of a sub-catchment scale approach to sediment control. The useful things about sediment traps is they're quite affordable and they can be placed and used using machinery often that's found on property already. So we don't provide funding for that, but we're definitely interested in looking into that space. People do it and have quite good success with it. Kia ora, thank you for the question.
Justine, there's a question just to add to your KPIs about
I'll also
measuring the
answer
success.
Louise. Louise always has many good
hold on,
questions. Pole supply is limited this year. Our nursery got hammered by the cyclones last year, and they're refixing the stools or replanting the stools that the ones and poles come from. We don't have a great supply. We have at the moment we've got 400 poles this year, which is enough to get our project going. Supply of wands is large, so we're in a position where we've got a large number of wands. So it is we're in a move and feast when it comes to supply of poles at the moment.
Great, Justine. Yeah, there was a question there from Pat about measuring the success of reducing sedimentation. So if you wanted to answer that alongside the KPIs we talked about before.
Yes, kia ora. It's a really good question, and many others in the research space will be better able to answer this than myself. But sedimentation is a very long-term contaminant in terms of being able to measure what's happening in from a statistical trend perspective. And so we are in live conversations with the Crown in particular, but also both regional councils around their sediment monitoring regimes for the catchment. There has been a piece of work around optimising that sediment monitoring network so that we would have set ourselves up well for future being able to understand really what's happening. So the long-term trend may take decades to demonstrate changes in sediment levels in the harbour and the waterways and the awa feeding into the moana. What we do know, and it's very well proven, is that taking action on the land can really help turn off that sediment tap. So we're taking action now. History will judge us, hopefully kindly, about what difference what we're doing is making. But it is a long-term prospect. It can take many decades, sometimes years, to really statistically demonstrate reductions in sediment, and there's a huge natural variation. Things like rainfall, heavy rainfall events like cyclones will put some anomalies into those data sets. So good news is that we have a lot of conversations around this. We know that councils are doing another investment in sediment monitoring in the next, actually this calendar year. And from my perspective, you know, I have other roles, and one of them is to work with the Crown around sediment monitoring needs, not just for this harbour, but from a national perspective. So it's pretty exciting. And we also have some new technologies that will help us do that. Just a big shout out to Fathom, which is a New Zealand company based down in Hamilton, and to Spark NZ for supporting us with 24/7 next generation sediment monitoring technologies that we are about to trial in the Auckland region, also with Auckland Council support. That will give us some really good insight too, Pat, on how things are operating from a response time, you know, where we get these large rainfall events, e.g. in the Hōtio River system, what happens on the plumes of sediment washing out into the moana. So we are going to have some pretty interesting real examples too, which will probably come ahead of and be more provide more insights to the monitoring question. But it's a work in progress, and it's going to be a long-term game. Kia ora.
Great, thank you very much. I'll do another sort of final call for questions. Stephen, if you could fill out the EOI form and mention that you're interested in talking about sediment bunds and traps, we can make sure that the person we refer you to in our field advisor team is aware of that and can have that conversation. But while everyone's thinking about their final flurry of questions, a reminder for our next webinar, which is being held Thursday, March the 14th at 10:30 again, looking at our approach to planting and our planting guide, which is a very popular hot topic. So make sure you RSVP to that. There'll be an email reminder, or you can sign up via our website or via our social media. I believe Jackie has a question.
Yeah, hi, it's Jackie Nen here. I look after a property in Whakapirau, and last year we planted 12 hectares of eroding hillside. I just wondered if you guys have any advice on how to control in particular Lotus Major, because I'm losing a lot of plants by smothering, and I'm trying to release them by hand, but it's pretty hard work. I guess I want reassurance that losing some plants or losing a whole gully, you know, seems like a real waste of money and time. And KMR helped us plant this 12 hectares, I should say. So that was cool. That was really great. But I don't want to lose it because I can't keep control of it. Do you have any advice?
Hi, Jackie. I'll be seeing you on Monday to, is it Monday? Wednesday to have a look at your site. We had a look, didn't we, before Christmas at the site. Let's have another look on Wednesday. We've got the contractors coming out site. There's money in your contract to do weed control. So I think once we have a look on site, we'll have a better idea. Lotus Major is a pain. It creeps and it crawls up the trees and smothers like Kikuyu. What you've done to date is great, and there is a wriggle room around dieback, and we'll have a look at the site to actually do an assessment of the surviving trees. I think reassurance will come when we have a good look on site, and we'll try and work with you to get that fix tailored to your needs. So hopefully that is what you're, yeah, that's what you've, we're fast coming on site, we'll get the service to you that you need. Kia ora.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't just talking about myself. I thought it might be helpful for other people if we had a discussion about how to do this. Because I feel like I've done a lot of stuff with KMR, but the post-planting side is a bit, it's just hard. And so I wondered, is there any point in talking about closer plant spacing, or because, you know, at 2 metre spacings, which is what the erosion stuff is at, it looks like I've got years ahead of me of trying to manage Lotus Major. Is that your opinion, or do you think I'll be a winner quicker than that?
Yeah, the reason we went to extended, well, we don't think it is. We think closer spacing is actually not an efficient way. Your canopy closure will be slightly quicker, but you'll actually lose those trees through shading in the future. We think that 2 metre or 2.5 metre spacing of trees in hill country is really suitable to our hill country. I think it's the timeliness of the weed control that we maybe need to sharpen our pencil on a bit, and making sure that we get the control before the emergence of the Lotus Major and having a really clean site in that first year of establishment. And once the trees are above, we have, you know, we're in a better position to outcompete those weeds that we're finding on your site. Lotus Major does respond to the good old Roundup, and we need to get an appropriate timeliness of spraying regime to keep it the competition from those trees. What I'm trying to say is it's all about the management of the site and frequent visits. There's no real answer to Northland and Auckland's weeds apart from real good control and timeliness and management. So let's have a look in your site, and if anyone else has those problem weeds, because you know, it's that initial kill, that initial knockback before the planting as well, gives those trees a bit of breathing space. Instead of me rambling on, Dave, have you got any other observations?
Yeah, I can hear your frustration, Jackie, and I think that with the wonderful forest growth that we experience up here in Northland, we also have to deal with all these weed problems. You know, I know Lotus Major does respond to selective herbicides, and a follow-up spray in the springtime after planting is probably a really good start. Obviously, we're sort of past that now, but doing that again in autumn and in spring again, those shoulder seasons is a really good time to be targeting Lotus Major and some of those other broadleaf invasive weeds. The other thing I would note is that our hill country planting is at a wider spacing, but it's also a narrower selection of native species that we're planting, and they are the bread and butter hardy go-to species. I'm sure you're familiar with them, but you know, we would like to think that there's, within a couple of years, and we've seen it with a lot of projects, that within 2 to 3 years, that canopy closure will be enough to be able to shade out some of these plants and actually suppress some of these weeds. Obviously, when you've got something that's scrambling all over your seedlings, that's quite a challenge. But it sounds like Dunk's going to be out to see you in the coming week or so, and I think that we need to be picking up on these challenges as we go along, and perhaps there is a need for us to have some more information available, or perhaps some more of these webinars where we're able to get landowners together who have had some experience with planting with KMR and are keen to talk about some of the challenges, and maybe we can do some Q&A, some troubleshooting together that way. Just putting it out there. Cheers,
Yeah,
Jeff.
that would be great.
Got it. And just to help others who may not be so familiar with the projects, landowners have their choice. It's landowner choice is a very big principle for KMR. So some landowners, of course, will elect to do hand removal because of their choices around whether it's organics or just because they don't want poisons near waterways. Other landowners more happier to use what I call more traditional herbicides and other applications. Depending on the landowner choice, KMR will provide advice in line with those aspirations of the landowner. Question from Wayne Burt around using wool. If the landowner would like to use wool to do suppression, they're very welcome. We are looking at some R&D support for low cost formulations that have the same effect. That's very, very early days, working with Northland Inc., but far removed. The point that I guess I'm making here, though, is that the landowner is responsible under our contracting. They get a lot of funding support, but the landowner is responsible for making sure that those trees survive up to, as much as possible, have good survival rates post-planting. They can elect, with good advice from KMR and others, to use the weed suppression methods of their choice. So look, honestly, there are a range of activities that do go on land, and particularly in some of our whenua whānui fund projects. Those are our smaller, often more community facing rather than the rural pastoral landowner projects. So I just wanted to give a sense that there's not a norm or a single answer here, and as Duncan rightly pointed out, and Dave too, obviously the landowner choice, but also the species planted, the type of land that's planted, and I guess the longer term aspirations for the farm system or property will really play into those choices. So there isn't one single answer there, but what we do want is those trees to stay alive. Kia ora.
Great. A bit of a change of tack now. There is a question from Martin about the development of wetlands in the hillside landscape being considered. If someone wanted to jump in on their thoughts there, Duncan.
I can have a go at that, Ben. When we're looking at a landscape, we're looking at a mosaic of moisture regimes on the hillside. There's, especially when you've got rumpled country that's on airflow, so you often do have wetlands there or wet areas in your hill country. Often they are grazed, often they are damaged. So it's not so much about development, but enhancement of the existing habitats that we have. And through planting and removal of that grazing, we can enhance the redevelopment of the wetlands. Basically, wetlands are one of our fastest responding parts of the hill country, and we will be planting them selectively, so getting the right species in. So people like Dave will give us advice on what species should be planted in these wetter areas. And with that removal of grazing, often you see these wetlands wet up, expand. And so not so much development, because I feel our wetland creation question there, more about enhancing of what we've already got, which is a lot more effective and in keeping with the landscape. So hopefully that answers your question, Kia ora.
Great, thanks, Dunk. There's of course a question from Danielle about KMR supporting the use of accredited contractors to support pest control during those first years. Justine, or did you want to have a go at attempting that? I mean, I think, as Dave mentioned before, there's definitely going to be a webinar in the near future to talk about post-planting and maybe some pest control for those who are interested. But Justine, if you wanted to answer that one.
Kia ora everyone, and nice to talk to you, Danielle. Great to see you. Look, it's the same approach as in weed control too. KMR supports, we fund or co-fund projects on the land to reduce sediment, and the landowner takes some responsibilities for making sure the project happens with that investment, but also that those rushes, trees, shrubs stay standing. And so that does require, in some cases, as we've heard, weed control, in some cases pest control from browsing pests. So there are accredited suppliers who know about these things and who will be doing work on the land, who can be asked. We do have some guidance on our website around managing browsing pests, but ultimately it's the landowner's responsibility to make sure that those plants survive. And so we don't fund that, but we do recognise in some cases through whenua whānui fund investments, the activity, often humans doing trapping and other work to reduce those browsing pest numbers and keep those trees alive. Kia ora.
Great, and for those who may not have seen in the chat, Vern's also mentioned there's some selective sprays that you can use on lotus. If no one's got any other questions, or if they've got anything specific, feel free to send us an email, whether that's about sediment traps, expressions of interest, honoi@kmr.org.nz, or if you've got ideas for future webinars that you'd like to see, send them through and we'll start putting those in the calendar as well. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us today, to Steph, Dunk, Dave and Justine for presenting. A video of this will bounce down and probably appear in your inbox in the next little while this afternoon. Otherwise, we'll see hopefully you again on March the 14th to talk about our planting guide. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.
Thanks for joining us. Ka kite.